A new report suggests the FBI believes Brown could be hiding among the Mormons.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most infamous individuals to have appeared on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, whether they've been captured or are now deceased.
And this is her situation. She's a victim rather than a perpetrator.
Number 30, Glenn Stewart Godwin.
Take a look at some of the sketches, and this is the last good photo of Godwin.
In 1980, Glenn Stewart Godwin decided to rob a drug dealer with his roommate, but they ended up murdering him. To cover up the crime, they attempted to load the corpse with explosives. However, this plan failed and they were both apprehended. Godwin was sentenced to 26 years to life, but he managed to escape from prison and fled to Mexico. While there, he was arrested for dealing drugs, which alerted American authorities. But while they worked on his extradition, Godwin murdered a fellow inmate, further delaying the process and allowing him to escape again in 1991. Since then, he has evaded capture and is believed to be living under an alias in Latin America. Godwin was removed from the most wanted list in 2016.
He has to be perfect every day. I only have to be perfect once to eventually catch him.
Number 29, Alejandro Castillo.
Alex Castillo is charged with an extremely ruthless crime.
Alejandro Castillo was just 18 years old when he was added to the 10 most wanted fugitives list in October 2017. His inclusion was as a result of the murder of his ex-girlfriend and co-worker, Chukwan Sandy Lai Lee, in August 2016. At the time, Castillo owed Lee some money and asked to meet her at a convenience store to repay the loan. However, she was never seen again.
When Feaster and Lee didn't come home one night, their families thought the young women were missing. It turned out the three were in a love triangle that took a deadly turn.
After killing Lee, Castillo fled to Mexico with his accomplice and girlfriend, Amia Feaster, who was also their co-worker. While Feaster turned herself in 2 months later, Castillo has remained at large. In 2023, the FBI announced a reward of up to $250,000 for information leading to his arrest.
Take a good look, because it's been nearly a decade since these pictures were taken. The FBI hopes a bump in the reward to $250,000 will lead to Castillo's capture.
Number 28, Anthony Brancato. After honing his skills as an armed robber in Kansas City, Anthony Brancato moved to Los Angeles in 1946, when such skills were in high demand by the mob. He quickly became a freelance gunman, suspected of being involved in several gangland murders, including that of Bugsy Siegel. Brancato teamed up with fellow Kansas City criminal Anthony Trombino, forming the notorious duo the Two Tonys. In 1951, Brancato and Trombino robbed the Flamingo Hotel and Resort in Las Vegas, resulting in Brancato appearing on the most wanted list for just 2 days before he surrendered. After their release from jail, LA mob boss Jack Dragna allegedly ordered their killings, and both were shot dead in their car on August 6, 1951. Number 27, Angela Davis.
The FBI pursued Davis in connection to the Marin County Courthouse shooting and circulated her photographs across the country.
Today, Angela Davis is a respected activist, academic, and author, but back in the 1970s, she was deemed a terrorist due to her affiliation with the Communist Party. This not only led to her temporary dismissal as an assistant professor at UCLA, but also landed her on the most wanted list in 1970.
I was a political prisoner, falsely charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Because of my politics, because of my membership in the Communist Party, because of my involvement in the Black Liberation Movement.
The catalyst was an August 1970 incident in which weapons purchased by Davis were used in an attack on a courthouse in California, resulting in a judge's death. Although not involved in the attack, an arrest warrant was issued for Davis, prompting her to flee California and go into hiding for 2 months before she was arrested in New York. Davis was charged with aggravated kidnapping and murder, but was ultimately acquitted.
When her trial began, just days later, it drew worldwide attention. In court, Davis admitted to owning the guns used in the shooting, but argued that she had bought them for self-defense and they'd been taken without her knowledge.
Number 26, Yasser Abdul Saeed.
I'm erasing this tape.
No, you can't.
Behind the camera is their father, Yasser Saeed.
Do I videotape you when you're sleeping?
Born in Egypt, Yasser Abdul Saeed moved to the U.S. in 1983 and later became a citizen. He had 3 children, including 2 daughters, Amina and Sarah, whom he reportedly assaulted both physically and sexually. Believing they had dishonored the family by refusing arranged marriages and dating non-Muslims, Saeed decided to kill his daughters.
You hear her last breath. She was fighting till the very end.
On January 1, 2008, he took them for a ride in his taxi and fatally shot them. Saeed went on the run immediately after and managed to evade capture for 12 years. Although he was initially thought to have fled to Egypt, he was arrested in Texas in August 2020, along with his son and brother. Saeed was ultimately found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
The defendant came out and surrendered and lay prone on the ground and was handcuffed.
Saeed showed little emotion Friday as jurors were shown clothing his girls were wearing when they were killed.
Number 25, Willie Sutton.
Reportedly, he was asked once why he robbed banks, and he reported to have said, well, because that's where the money is.
On March 20th, 1950, just 1 week after its creation, the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list added its 11th name, Willie Sutton. Sutton was a notorious bank robber who stole approximately $2 million throughout his long career. He was first sent to prison in 1931, but successfully escaped on 3 different occasions. After his third escape in 1947 from the Philadelphia County Prison, Sutton was placed on the most wanted list. He remained on the run until February 1952, when a clothing salesman recognized him on a subway and alerted the authorities. Sutton received a prison sentence of 30 to 120 years, but was released in 1969 due to good behavior and poor health.
Willie Sutton's countless attempted jailbreaks and 3 spectacular escapes have secured him a place in the history of weird crime and punishment.
Number 24, Donald Eugene Webb.
The FBI says Webb died sometime around 1999. That's 19 years after Adams was shot and killed.
On December 4th, 1980, the town of Saxonburg, Pennsylvania was rocked by its first murder in over a century. Police Chief Gregory Adams pulled over a man named Donald Eugene Webb in a routine traffic stop. When Adams asked to see his license, Webb attacked and shot him twice at close range.
We didn't realize until this investigation really unfolded in the last few weeks is the hero that Chief Adams actually was, because he really fought for his life that day.
A nationwide manhunt for Webb was launched, and in 1981, he was placed on the most wanted list, where he remained for nearly 26 years before being removed in 2007, as authorities believed he had died. That presumption was confirmed in 2017, when investigators discovered that Webb's wife Lillian had harbored him in 2 of her homes until he passed away from a stroke in 1999.
And so, after 37 years, it's hoped that the identification of Webb's body and word of Chief Adams' heroics will give solace to his family and help the Saxonburg community move on.
Number 23, Ruja Ignatova.
She would always have large parties. I went to her birthday party. It's a typical Ruja party. Everybody dressed to the nines, Ruja dripping in diamonds from head to toe.
Ruja Ignatova became known as the crypto queen for her digital currency OneCoin, which she founded in 2014. However, less than a decade later, she earned a new title, FBI's Most Wanted Fugitive. OneCoin, it turns out, was nothing more than a pyramid scheme that swindled investors from around the world of $4 billion.
How much in the end did you invest?
I was 10,000 euros, but of course you speak to family, friends, and then they speak to their family and their friends, and it just goes on.
In 2017, when it became clear that authorities were investigating her company, Ignatova vanished into thin air. She has since appeared on the most wanted lists of the FBI and Europol, with a $5 million reward offered for information leading to her arrest. Although still at large, rumors suggest that Ignatova may have been murdered in 2018 on the orders of a Bulgarian drug lord.
Let's say she lives the high life on some yacht in the Mediterranean. It is difficult to do that on such a profile. She is not the type that will live in the jungle and hunt for food.
Number 22, Andrew Cunanan. Between April and July 1997, Andrew Cunanan went on a killing spree across 4 states, claiming the lives of 5 people. But he is mostly remembered for the murder of his final victim, renowned fashion designer Gianni Versace. On July 15, 1997, Cunanan fatally shot Versace at the entrance of his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida.
Here in Miami, they are continuing to mourn the death of Gianni Versace, gathering in front of the home where he was gunned down yesterday.
By that time, he had already spent about 1 month on the 10 most wanted fugitives list, but managed to lay low. Just 1 week after Versace's murder, Cunanan turned the same weapon on himself and took his own life before he could be captured. To this day, no one knows the motives behind his deadly rampage.
Lieutenant Dale Barsness is the head of homicide for Minneapolis Police. His prediction turns out to be true. 8 days after the Versace murder, Cunanan commits suicide in a nearby houseboat.
Number 21, Robert William Fisher.
There are 3 bodies found inside the house. Robert's truck is in the driveway. Mary's car is missing.
In June 2002, former U.S. Navy personnel and firefighter Robert William Fisher became the 475th fugitive to appear on the 10 most wanted list. He was wanted for the alleged murder of his wife and 2 children at their home in Scottsdale, Arizona. Fisher, whose parents divorced when he was a teenager, reportedly had a troubled marriage on the brink of divorce.
What makes this really hard to see is that everybody, including myself, is used to seeing that family portrait. That's our greatest knowledge of Brittany and Bobby, what they look like is from that portrait.
Before that could happen, he killed his family and fled, rigging their house to explode hours later, supposedly to destroy all evidence of the crime. Since then, Fisher's whereabouts have never been verified, despite hundreds of tips received by the FBI. In 2021, he was taken off the list, though he still remains a wanted fugitive.
Out of character and unexplainable. It's still beyond comprehension as far as how this could happen.
Number 20, Ramzi Yousef.
The Bojinka plot was very much a proof of concept for Al-Qaeda.
Almost a decade before 9/11, the World Trade Center was hit with a terrorist attack that claimed 6 lives and left more than 1,000 injured. Ramzi Yousef, one of the brains behind the 1993 incident, fled the U.S. just hours later and was subsequently added to the FBI's list. During his period at large, Yousef masterminded what is now known as the Bojinka plot, which included a plan to assassinate Pope John Paul II and attack 11 planes en route to the United States.
The idea was to create confusion with the assassination of the Pope, experts say, and then quickly launch your second phase.
Although detailed, the plan failed, and Yousef was later arrested after one of his former associates ratted him out. He was extradited to the U.S., where he is currently behind bars for life. Number 19, Ruth Eisman Shear. The first woman to ever appear on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, Eisman Shear and her boyfriend Gary Stephen Christ orchestrated the kidnapping of heiress Barbara Jane Mackle in 1968. The 2 criminals abducted Mackle from her hotel room and took her to a remote area, where they buried her in a ventilated box for more than 3 days. Luckily, Mackle was rescued in relatively good condition. Christ was apprehended just 2 days later.
And applied for a job at Central State Hospital. And when you go to work for the hospital, you have to be fingerprinted and a background check.
It would take the better part of 3 months for Eisman Shear to be caught. But after it finally happened, she spent 4 years in prison and was deported to her home country of Honduras. Number 18, Jason Derek Brown. Before he was included on the FBI's most wanted list, Jason Derek Brown was a seemingly successful business person with a taste for the expensive. In reality, he was deeply in debt and involved in various sketchy schemes. His apparent life of luxury came to an end in November of 2004 when he carried out a heist of an armored car outside a movie theater, killing the guard.
This was just a cold-blooded ambush in which the suspect was waiting for this man.
Brown fled the scene and bounced around the U.S. before disappearing completely. His surfer dude looks have led to supposed sightings of him all around the country, the majority of which have turned out to be false.
The FBI has more tips on Brown than any other fugitive on the most wanted list.
In 2022, Brown was removed from the list, although he still remains at large. Number 17, James Charles Kopp. Nicknamed Atomic Dog, James Charles Kopp was closely affiliated with anti-abortion militants, including the Christian Lambs of Christ. In 1998, he fatally shot physician Barnett Slepian in his own home. Dr. Slepian provided abortion services for several New York communities.
Outrage. I don't think any of us are fearful for our lives. We are outraged that somebody would have the audacity and the just terrible gall to come in and do that to another human being.
After committing the murder, Kopp fled the U.S., moving to Mexico and Ireland before landing in France in March of 2001. 2 weeks later, he was arrested by French police and extradited to the U.S. He's serving a lifetime sentence without the possibility of parole. Police suspect that he was also responsible for the murder of several other doctors in the U.S. and Canada. Number 16, Leslie Isbin Rog. Bank robber Leslie Isbin Rog was the first ever criminal on the FBI list apprehended thanks to the internet.
He loved boats. He's probably around the water somewhere. He's probably got a bush bear in his hand.
Rog built his criminal career on bank robberies across the U.S., from Florida to Missouri. He was caught and convicted in 1984, but escaped the following year to commit even more robberies.
If they really wanted to find him, all they would have to do is go into the areas where they think he is and probably run a special on bush bear, and he'd come by it.
In all, Rog robbed over 24 banks and made away with over $2 million.
His travels, financed with stolen cashier's checks, have taken him from Belhaven, North Carolina, to Charleston, South Carolina, to Hendersonville, North Carolina, always just a step ahead of police.
He remained on the run for several years before his picture on the FBI's website was recognized by someone in Guatemala, who alerted the local authorities. Rog will remain locked up until 2034, when he will be 94 years old. Number 15, Eric Rudolph. Another anti-abortion militant, Eric Rudolph was behind the Centennial Olympic Park bombing during the 1996 Summer Olympics.
And nobody's bothering you, right?
Well,
He also bombed 2 abortion clinics and a lesbian bar. For 5 years, he hid in the Appalachian wilderness, but in 2003, he was arrested at a grocery store in North Carolina. He pleaded guilty to all charges, including murder, and revealed that he had hidden 250 pounds of dynamite in the forest. Unrepentant, he has written essays from prison promoting violence, published online by Christian terrorist organization Army of God.
He didn't change a thing.
No, except that his actions destroyed a lot of lives, including his.
Number 14, Warren Jeffs.
You don't know any better until you get away from it. And getting away from it is the hard part.
The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a radical denomination of the Mormon Church that still preaches polygamy. When he took over as president of the church, Warren Jeffs married nearly all of his father's widows and took strict control over who his followers married. His regime was fraught with allegations of assault, and he was responsible for arranging marriages between adult men and minors.
Warren had himself 78 wives. 24 of those wives were underage.
After appearing on the FBI Most Wanted list for just 4 months, Jeffs was arrested at a traffic stop and tried for his crimes in Utah, Arizona, and Texas. He is currently serving a life sentence in Texas.
There were 10 women on that jury, and there were 2 men, and I've always maintained that it was a good thing for Warren Jeffs that there were a bunch of Texas Rangers in that courtroom, because after those 10 women heard that audio tape, they would have jumped over the railings and killed Warren with their bare hands.
Number 13, Alexis Flores. In 2000, a drifter going by the name Carlos was working as a handyman in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. That summer, the body of a missing girl was found in the apartment building where Carlos lived, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. 4 years later, Alexis Flores was arrested for forgery in Arizona and jailed for 60 days, before he was deported back to his home country of Honduras. After his deportation, DNA samples taken from Flores in Arizona matched those from the murder case in Philadelphia, proving that Carlos was, in fact, Flores. He was added to the FBI's list soon after and is currently believed to be hiding either in Honduras or somewhere in the U.S. Number 12, Juan Garcia Abrego. The first drug trafficker to appear on the FBI's list, Juan Garcia Abrego gained notoriety as the ruthless leader of the Gulf Cartel. After taking over the reins of the cartel from his uncle, Garcia Abrego transformed it into one of the most expansive crime syndicates along the U.S.-Mexico border. He shipped not only drugs into the U.S., but also millions of dollars to be laundered. With such an infamous reputation, he was added to the FBI's list in 1995 and apprehended almost a year later on a ranch in Mexico. He was tried on 22 counts of money laundering and drug trafficking and bagged himself 11 consecutive life sentences in the slammer. Number 11, Jose Rodolfo Villarreal Hernandez. Speaking of the Gulf Cartel, they feuded heavily with another Mexican syndicate called the Beltran-Leyva Cartel. As part of their ongoing rivalry, the Gulf Cartel arranged to have the father of Jose Rodolfo Villarreal Hernandez murdered. Villarreal Hernandez, who was a Beltran-Leyva boss, sought to enact his revenge, but not on any of his rival drug lords. Instead, he targeted Juan Jesus Guerrero Chapa, the Gulf Cartel's lawyer who represented their leader. In May 2013, Guerrero was tracked down to South Lake, Texas, and assassinated by Villarreal Hernandez's men. Investigation by the authorities traced the murder plot back to Villarreal Hernandez, who was then added to the most wanted list. His name remained there until January 7, 2023, when he was arrested in Mexico. Number 10, Thomas James Holden. Over the last 70 years, more than 500 names have graced the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. Thomas James Holden was the very first. A career criminal, Holden first appeared on the FBI's radar as one half of the notorious Holden Keating gang. Together with Francis Keating, he went on a robbery spree in the Midwest throughout the 1920s and 30s, targeting payroll deliveries, trains, and banks. Shortly after his second stint in prison, Holden shot his wife and her two brothers after a drunken night and fled the scene. The following year, he appeared as the first fugitive on the FBI's inaugural list. He was eventually captured and thrown right back in prison. Number 9, Victor Manuel Gerena. With a record 32 years, Victor Manuel Gerena remains the fugitive with the longest amount of time spent on the most wanted list. While working as an armored car guard for Wells Fargo in 1983, Gerena and his accomplices pulled off a heist of $7 million from the company's depot. This became the biggest cash theft carried out on U.S. soil at the time. Gerena escaped to Mexico soon after the robbery and hasn't been seen since then. He was added to the FBI's list the following year and remained there until he was taken off in 2016. While many of his co-conspirators have since been apprehended, the whereabouts of Victor Manuel Gerena remain unsolved. Number 8, William Bradford Bishop Jr. Before the horrific events of March 1, 1976, William Bradford Bishop Jr. lived the American dream. The Yale alum and former diplomat was married to his high school sweetheart and was the father to 3 boys.
You know, you would have thought that they were the perfect family. They seemed to be very happy.
After finding out he was passed over for a promotion on that fateful day, Bishop returned home and allegedly murdered his family as well as his mother. For decades, the feds have combed through lead after lead, but have turned up nothing in their search for Bishop.
One of the rangers noticed the car, and he thought that maybe it was a backpacker. They run the plate, and turned out that guy was wanted by the FBI.
From 2014 to 2018, Bishop was named as one of the 10 most wanted fugitives, but he was kicked off the list in favor of more dangerous people. Number 7, Leonard Peltier. The criminal case of Leonard Peltier is one that has been heavily debated for decades.
I'll be an old man when I get out.
An activist and member of the American Indian movement, Peltier appeared on the most wanted list for his involvement in the killing of 2 FBI agents at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. He was arrested just 2 months later in Canada and extradited back to the U.S., where he was tried and convicted. Peltier's trial raised several questions concerning the evidence presented and the witness testimonies, some of which have since been recanted.
Witnesses were coerced by the FBI into saying they saw Peltier shoot the agents. Ballistics evidence that could have aided Leonard's defense was hidden from his lawyers.
Despite clemency appeals from several human rights groups and key political figures, Peltier's convictions, 2 life sentences, and additional time for a 1979 prison escape still stand. Number 6, Raphael Caro Quintero. The whopping $20 million reward for information leading to the capture of Raphael Caro Quintero was at the time the largest offered for an FBI most wanted fugitive. One of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel, Caro Quintero went to prison in 1985 for his role in the murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena Salazar.
What the
What were they thinking? They could kill an American government agent and get away with it?
He was released in 2013 after a state tribunal in Mexico ruled that he should have been tried for murder in a state, not federal court.
How could this drug lord be released from prison without the United States knowing?
We are extremely disappointed, and more than that, we are angry.
After outrage from the Obama administration, the Mexican government issued a new arrest warrant a few days later, but Caro Quintero was long gone. He was, however, captured in Mexico on July 15, 2022, in a covert mission that left 14 Mexican service members dead in a helicopter crash. Number 5. Semyon Mogilevich.
He has contacts in various industries. He's a highly educated man. He's definitely a different type of mobster now.
Arms trafficking, racketeering, money laundering, contract murders. These are just a few of the criminal charges leveled against Russian mafia boss Semyon Mogilevich.
He has access to so much, including funding, including other criminal organizations, that he can, with a telephone call, affect the global economy.
Described by the FBI as, quote, the most dangerous mobster in the world, Mogilevich was placed on the most wanted list in 2009 after scamming millions of dollars from investors of a Canadian company he oversaw.
Investors lost millions into the pockets of Mogilevich and his associates.
It was a long shot, as the feds knew he had high-profile connections in Russia and was living freely in Moscow. Due to the lack of an extradition treaty between Russia and the U.S., Mogilevich was taken off the list in 2015, but he is still being actively pursued by the FBI. Number 4. James Whitey Bulger. One of the most notorious mob bosses ever to spring out of Boston, James Whitey Bulger was the leader of the Winter Hill Gang.
You threatening me, Bulger?
The last thing I would do if I was planning to harm you is to warn you in advance, you dumb f***.
Bulger had his hands in multiple criminal enterprises, such as racketeering, money laundering, extortion, and even murder. Yet he worked as an FBI informant against other mobs. Facing impending prosecution, he fled Boston and remained in hiding for 16 years. During this period, he was added to the list and was at one time the second most wanted man in the U.S. behind only Osama Bin Laden. After he was apprehended in 2011, Bulger was convicted of his many crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2018, he met his demise at the hands of other inmates. Number 3. Theodore Ted Bundy. One of the most infamous serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy was responsible for the deaths of at least 30 women in the 1970s. He was arrested in 1975, but managed to escape from prison twice, killing even more women while he was on the run. Bundy used his charm and good looks to lure his victims in, before assaulting them and taking their lives. After his second escape from prison, his name was added to the FBI's list. He only spent 5 days on the list before he was arrested at a traffic stop. Following 2 highly publicized trials, Bundy was found guilty of 3 murders and was executed by electric chair in 1989.
Ted Bundy is dead!
Number 2. James Earl Ray. Already a convicted armed robber and fraudster, James Earl Ray gained notoriety for his 1968 assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Ray, who had escaped from prison the previous year, ran up north to Canada and laid low for a while.
2 months after the murder, a Scotland Yard detective in London's airport recognized Ray from his mugshot and detained the killer of an American icon.
After a few months on the run, Ray was arrested in London and sent back to the U.S. to stand trial for his crime. There, he pleaded guilty to King's murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison.
The mystery, the enigma about James Earl Ray is, to this day, we don't know exactly why he did it.
Having appeared on the FBI's Most Wanted Fugitives in 1968, Ray's name resurfaced on the list in 1977 when he escaped from prison with 6 other inmates. He was recaptured 3 days later and died in prison at the age of 70. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Osama Bin Laden. As the founder of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden was responsible for masterminding several terrorist attacks. Although most infamous for the events of September 11, 2001, bin Laden originally appeared on the FBI's list 2 years earlier. His inclusion was as a result of his involvement in the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. After the 9/11 attacks, Bin Laden became the most wanted man in the world, with the FBI placing a $25 million bounty on his head. Bin Laden managed to evade capture for more than a decade, but met his end in May 2011, when he was shot and killed by U.S. military forces in Abbottabad, Pakistan.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
Which of these fugitives do you think will be captured next? Let us know in the comments. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.